doing neurofeedback for almost 28 years now, and have a company that I started in 1994. It's been teaching and selling equipment for people that want to train brains, trying to change the sort of model that people use, the scientific model, pathology model, where you say there's such a thing as a normal brain and an abnormal brain, and people who don't come up normal on some test or another don't have a normal brain.
That's awesome.
Want shorter answers or longer answers?
No, that's great. I'm recording this, and then I'm gonna take as much as I can to put into an article without changing like your words or anything. So then, where are you from?
Originally from upstate New York, but lived all over. I lived in Chicago and Portland, Oregon, and West Texas, and Boston. I came to Miami, Atlanta, spent 12 years in Brazil. Always one step ahead of the law.
I like that. And would you say how old you are?
Yep, 73.
Cool. And what's your background in health or engineering? Well, health, in your case.
I had an undergraduate degree in creative writing in 1968 from Washington University in St. Louis, and then 10 years later, in 78, I finished a master's and MBA from Northwestern University in healthcare management. So I had a nice, great career path. In between and before those times, I was a professional photographer, a carpenter, hospital administrator for a number of years, taught sales at some large corporations. I don't remember all this stuff, but basically I did whatever was interesting to me at the time.
Sure.
And none of the things that were interesting to me at the time stayed interesting for very long. But this has been very interesting for almost 3 decades now.
Okay, so then good segue. So then why do you keep working with this technology? I know you kind of said it before.
Why do I keep working with technology?
Well, with biofeedback technology and neurofeedback technology.
I keep working with it because I have seen almost from the very beginning that it had the ability to give people the power to change their own lives in lasting ways and literally change the course and the direction of their lives. I was one of those people. I mean, I was not ADD, or at least nobody diagnosed me as ADD, because back in those days there wasn't such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was just lazy and not living up to my potential, but nobody was ready to give me drugs for it, so I kind of made it through. I tried lots of stuff and was good at lots of stuff. I mean, I wrote music and wrote plays and short stories and took pictures that were magazine covers and stuff like that. That just, it all became routine for me. I didn't like routine for very long. The way I stayed in hospital management for so long was that I got a job at one of the big international hospital management companies, which were sort of springing up in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, somebody there figured out pretty quickly that I was not a good person to send into a hospital that everything was working well, because they get bored. And so they sent me into turnarounds. So whenever they had a place that was falling apart, the medical staff was at war with the board, or whatever was happening, financial problems, community was unhappy, they'd send me in there, leave me there for a couple of years, and then move me on to the next place.
Okay.
But how that led to neurofeedback was that after I left healthcare when I saw the direction that was going back in the, I guess it would have been around the 90s, early 90s. A friend and I started a company working with clinicians, mental health clinicians in private practice, who were very frequently horrible business people.
I've noticed.
And so we went in and sort of worked with them and helped them fix their problems. And then after about a year of doing that, we realized that we were becoming therapist to therapist, because when one of them had a big problem with collections, you could set up a system and get caught up on the collections, but as soon as you walked out the door, the whole thing would fall apart. And then we realized it was because, you know, they had that feeling that social workers sometimes have, and others, that, oh, I shouldn't be getting paid for this. I should just be doing it for the good of humanity and all that kind of stuff. So the last guy we worked with was a PhD psychologist who was also an electrical engineer. And he approached us, said, I've heard about this guy named Joel Lubar, who's one of the pioneers of neurofeedback. And I took a course with him, and I have been using his hardware, learning how to use it, and I really like to try this out in my practice and see what it's like for a year, but I'd like some help to get people to come in and figure out how to handle it and all that kind of stuff. So we agreed to do that. In fact, he was our last client. And at the end of that year, he decided that he didn't want to keep doing it because he hated children and adolescents, and that's about all you got for neurofeedback back in those days. So we took over his equipment, bought his equipment from him, and started doing it ourselves, and then realized that it wasn't going to work too well with two of us. So my friend took a job with one of our other ex-clients, managing their practice, and I started Brain Trainer.
Okay. And that was back when you just had the single sensor EEG, right?
That was, 91, 92. So their $5,000 amplifier in that time was about the size of 2 telephone books, and had one channel, went up to 32 hertz, I think. Very limited in what it could do. Had no input impedance. So if you left the fluorescent lights on after you hooked somebody up, even if you were working with a 5-year-old, the 5-year-old could look at the signal and say, "You forgot to turn the lights off." So it was a very different deal. And basically there were like 2 protocols, and we did one or the other of those 2 protocols depending on what type of problem the kid seemed to have most strongly. And it worked for probably, 70, 75% of the time. But during the time that I was helping Michael, the psychologist, I went up and took a course with Lubar, and he told me after the course, he said, I think you're the first non-clinician who's ever taken this course with me, and you seem to have gotten it faster than most anybody I've ever had go through.
Sure.
And I said, yeah, I sort of have a feeling that I don't have all the built-in, trained-in expectations that they have, ways of looking at the world. And actually, his wife was a family therapist. And I had always been very interested in family systems. During the time that I was in hospital work, except for one place, I always had fairly large mental health areas. So I knew a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists, and I would get interested and read some of the books and just talk to them and learn and so forth. So when I was doing hospital work, especially with the turnarounds, I began to realize that there was a real strong connection between what I was doing in the hospital and what a family therapist would do with a family. Because you had all these various different groups or interest groups that were competing with each other, and you had to sort of find a way to pull them all together, find something that they could agree on. And so as I listened to Lou Barr's wife and started messing around with clients, I began to see that that was very true with what I was doing. And we had it was a hospital that was going under, it was a family that was going under. And by kind of getting them pulled together and moving in the same direction, it could make a big difference. But when I came back from that first first conference, I sort of went into where the equipment was, and I said, well, I know that you put stuff on your head and you plug wires into these things, and the software does something, and that's supposed to change you. But having been through a 3-day workshop, I didn't have any idea how any of that worked. So Michael helped me. I got myself hooked up. And the first couple of times I got myself hooked up, I thought the machine must be broken because it didn't look like it was possible that I could have gotten through Northwestern with that brain, But as I kept looking and it kept being the same brain, I started training it and discovering that things began to change in my life and how I was able to focus on things and just in general.
Sure.
And so, it sort of fit for me.
Cool. Okay, so then brain to talking about the ECG. Why? Well, okay. So how did you find out or get involved with the ECG?
Well, being a guy that always liked new stuff, back when in the late 90s, pretty much during the 90s, from 91 to 2001, 92 to 2001, I was in Atlanta. I had 4 offices and had people working for me in some of them, and I did all the training inside of the other one. And at the end of that time, there was just beginning to be some growth. The computers were becoming a lot easier to buy and use, and there began to be pieces of hardware that were much less expensive and worked with 2 channels and stuff like that. And so I was always kind of digging into those things. And so I met at a conference. I met Herschel Tuman, who was the guy that patented NIRHEG, he and Bob, and got really interested. I thought it was a very cool idea, and so I started using it. For some reason that I've never really understood, it's never become terribly popular.
Right.
I think partly because so many people try to make brain training as complicated as they possibly can. So that's such a simple thing that it doesn't seem that you would want to do that. You won't want to make it look like magic. So because I had, after 2002, we were selling equipment, we were selling packages, and I spent from 2001 to 2007 traveling all over the world teaching courses on neurofeedback. And so I taught a lot about HEG, and I saw some improvements coming from that. And then when we started putting together our packages and then growing into the area where we were talking about the whole brain training system, it just, it made sense to have it. It was easy to learn, easy to use, didn't take up the whole session, train something at EEG you couldn't train, and it was very cool.
Right.
I also knew that Bob and Herschel's business was sort of slim because there were so many people that didn't want to look at it. And so I've always been kind of interested in people who I thought had good stuff that nobody else was using, that I would start to use it because we had pretty good market power. We were able to sell to a lot of people. They liked our model that didn't have to be sick to be able to want to get better. And so that's just sort of the way it's been. And I contacted Bob 4 years plus ago to see if he would be interested in working on an update. And so he said, sure, he'd be happy to help us. And He's been working with us since that time through our whole flow of engineers that we've had that came in one end and went out the other.
Awesome. Okay, so the next question is, what, like, is there, I'm going to be asking several people this question, but are there any, like, particularly essential ideas about HEG neurofeedback that you want people to know? Or, like, just pick one. I mean, I suppose we could be here all day talking about it.
No, I think, the thing that I find people understand best is that there's probably not 10 people in Western civilization who don't already know about the idea of aerobic exercise.
Right.
Many of them have gone out and tried for a while, jogging or walking or swimming or riding bikes or whatever, and they understand that by doing that one thing consistently over a period of time, they change the way their body works. So one of the reasons I think that people have not gotten as turned on about HEG is that there's a huge confusion, and certainly in this country, but a lot in Western civilization in general, about what people call the mind-body question.
Right.
Is the mind more important? Is the body more important? Does the body drive the mind, and all that kind of stuff?
Right.
And I say it's a stupid question. The brain is the body. The brain runs the body. The brain also, what we experience of our brains, we call our minds.
Right.
But our minds don't drive our brains. Our brains drive our minds. So if you can change any other part of your body by exercising it, why can't you train your brain by exercising it? And we carry that through into EEG also. But once people understand that, I say, yeah, you're doing this exercise where you're really focusing and trying to make it climb. That's like aerobics. That's like jogging. The more you do it, the better the metabolism is going to be in your brain, and the faster those neurons will be able to fire,
Right.
and the better job you'll be able to do of concentrating, controlling, and doing all those things. On the other hand, you could also, if you want to change your body, you could do yoga or Pilates or Tai Chi,
Right.
which are not big exercise things. They're calming, stilling, centering, those kinds of things. And so the reason that we do diving, that we created that sort of concept of why do you only have to train up, that's definitely Western civilization. Got to pay more attention, got to be more logical, got to be more rational, got to, the world is run by engineers and all that stuff. And I'm a Taoist, so essentially I say, well, I don't necessarily go along with that.
Uh-huh.
I think that there are a lot of other things that are more important than packing more Cheerios into a box of Cheerios or whatever we're trying to do. There is the being side of life along with the doing side. And so with the life game and what we're trying to develop with the state changer is you can actually improve your ability to do both and to move back and forth between those states. And when you move back and forth between those states smoothly, you are doing what the research on peak performing brains says that's what those guys do.
Right.
They rest when they can rest. They go through things on autopilot. They coast. And then when there's a task that needs to be done, they've got the energy. They produce the energy. They focus the energy. They do the thing. And they go back to coasting.
Right. And just to clarify, when you said diving, you mean reducing, like willfully reducing blood flow in your prefrontal cortex, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say willfully, but practicing stillness.
Okay, sure.
So, in effect, what we do with the life game is almost exactly the definition of meditation. Because meditation, the back of your brain is in open focus, alpha, stillness and presence, awareness of what's going on in the here and now. And the front of your brain is in single pointed focus. So that's climbing, and the back is diving. We just teach the brain to do those two things by allowing it to learn how to control its control center, the executive center, which is the prefrontal.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay. Well, that's awesome. So then, okay. Well, next question. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Why keep doing this?
Say again.
The question's just a simple one. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Like, why do you keep doing this?
Well, I get out of bed because I wake up. And when I wake up, I say, okay, got some more time. That's cool. What am I going to do with it? I have a choice between doing like my brother did, which was retiring when he was 62 or 63, and now spends his days, playing basketball in over 70s leagues and softball and, pickleball and figuring out when his next vacation is going to be from what and all that kind of stuff. And I'm fortunate enough to say, geez, I got something I really love doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's challenging, and it's always something new and exciting, and I have cool people to work with, even though they're all over the world, spread all over the place.
That's part
of
the
I
coolness.
can help people all over the world to help themselves and help other people to have better lives. Why the hell would I retire from that, I'm sort of hoping that when I go, it's either going to be my number one choice with, a 25 or 30-year-old girl, or sitting here in my office trying to figure out how to solve the next problem for neurofeedback.
Right. I salute you, sir. Okay, so then last question.
So far, the 30-year-old girls haven't saluted me very much, but that's okay.
You're gonna walk around in a tuxedo or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the last question. Does anything else come to mind you'd like to share? We haven't talked about state changer in specifics. So, anything else?
No, I think just for people to recognize that the stuff that they believe is true, because they've heard it repeated over and over and over again, that doesn't make it true.
Right.
When I was in school, we had kids in my class, and I was, to some extent, one of them, who didn't like going to parties and didn't like getting drunk and, making fools of themselves and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And basically were very comfortable, me, going out in the woods and back and sitting by the stream and watching for carp to go by or whatever, and being still and being quiet. And we are now in a world where stillness is the last thing you want. Oh my God, no, I can't wait. There's nobody talking to. There's nobody to be with. So let me get on my cell phone. Let me put on my earplugs so that I can be listening to music or something. I've got to have noise in my head. And I really think that, and there is this thing about if you're not like everybody else, you're sick. So those people like me, when I was that age, people said, well, he's kind of shy. Now, if I did the same thing, they'd say, this guy's got a social anxiety disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And here, we got just a drug for you. This will fix you. So the percentage of people in our culture who take drugs, who take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5
or 7, it's crazy, yeah.
Astonishing. And they buy it, even though everybody knows. All you got to do is watch the commercials. Yes, boy, this might really help you if you fart a lot. But you could die if this happens, or your legs could fall off, or you might get, there's the side effects. You listed a list of side effects. And I recognize that the whole thing that the commercial does is try to produce some kind of an interesting visual story that keeps you from actually listening to what the guy is saying about all the horrible things that happen.
Just look at the people smiling.
Just get that first message, which is, wow, think how great it would be if you didn't fart anymore. Okay, so if you just leave that behind, just say, you know what, I am what I am. I am good at certain things. I'm not so good at others. I really don't want to be the average American, whatever that is.
Right.
But I have an opportunity here to help my brain to become the best brain it could possibly be for the things I can do with it. And, you know, it's not hard. It doesn't take very long. Kind of interesting. And I don't have to stick in my medical record and my school records and all my other records that I have bipolar disorder, or somebody 10 years ago decided that the fact that sometimes I was sad, sometimes I was enthusiastic, meant that I had something that was wrong with me.
Right.
You know, it's just, in the book of Tao, it says, you know, that the Tao that can be described is not the real Tao. You know, there's the Tao, which is the flow of life as we move through our lives.
Right.
And then there is what they call the 10,000 things. Our culture is all about 10,000 things and everything that we possibly can do to keep from feeling the flow of life and actually moving through life in a respectful and an enjoyable way.
Right.
Instead of trying to silence everything, it's just it's scary because I don't know where that goes. It's good.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so you got a lot of editing to do.
It's good. It's like almost 30 minutes. So thank you, Peter. And,
you can't make a good statue unless you start off with a really big chunk of rock. So I gave you a big chunk of rock. You can see what you can make out of it.
I incredibly appreciate your time and your work and your story. And yeah, onward and upward.
All righty. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.